Okay, I think it's worth going over at least one more example of this because it is quite a process, okay? So remember what we're trying to do. In this case, we're going to be once again given a table of an exponential function. If we look at the right column, it's growing super fast, right? It's growing very quickly, which we would expect from an exponential function with a common ratio greater than 1, okay? So remember what we're trying to do. We have g of x. It's an exponential function. So let's write that in the form a times b to the x power, right? Where a is the initial value, right? Or the value g of 0, right? G of 0 equals a. And b is let's call it the ratio, right? B is the ratio. That's what you multiply by each time to get to your next value, right? Okay. So let's think. We clearly need to find B and we need to find A, right? We don't have any of that information yet. So what are we going to do? Okay. What we're going to do is we're going to pick 2 points, right? We're going to pick 2 points. Let's pick G of 3 and G of 5. Or actually G of 5 and G of 3, right? We always want to start with a greater input, right? And we're going to just calculate the ratio of any two given values, okay? We always want to calculate when we're doing this, we want to calculate the ratio of any two given values, okay? And we know that g of 5 over g of 3, right? Well, let's just write that out first in our function form, okay? That's going to be a times b to the fifth power over a times b to the third power, okay? We always want to write that ratio out in terms of our function, and then we want to write that ratio in terms of the known values, okay? We know that g of 5 is 1875, okay? And we know that g of 3 is 75, okay? And whoops, let me get rid of that. This information here, this equation here, is what we're going to use to solve for b, okay? How are we going to do that? Well, let's look what happens on the left-hand side. These a's are going to cancel out, right? And we're going to be left with b to the fifth power over b to the third power is equal to 1875 divided by 75, okay? So let's try to simplify both sides, okay? We know that b to the fifth power divided by b to the third power. Let me just write that out. B to the fifth power divided by b to the third power. We know from our properties of exponents this is equal to b to the fifth minus 3, right? We know that's equal to b to the 5 minus third power, which is equal to b squared, okay? So we know that's equal to b squared. So let me make some room here to write that out. So we know that the left-hand side of this equation is b squared. And what's the right-hand side? Let's see if that divides evenly. Let's see if 1,875 is divisible by 75. It is. It equals 25, okay? So we've simplified this equation here to b squared equals 25. And now what do we do to find the value of b, right? We're just going to take the square root of both sides, remember? And we're going to get b equals 5. Okay, so we've found the ratio already. Okay, so if you have two outputs of an exponential function, okay, if you know what two outputs are, you're going to take their ratio like we did here, right? And to set that up, on one side, you're going to take the ratio where you just input that input, right, into the functional form. And on the other side of that equation, you're going to take the ratio of the values like we did here, okay? Then you're just going to simplify that as much as you can. And if you know your properties of exponents and how to solve if you have a variable raised to some power, you're going to be able to find your ratio, okay? So we know that in this case, the ratio is equal to b. Okay, now that we have that, Let's clear some room, okay? We found our ratio, right? And to write the equation of an exponential function, what do we need? We just need the initial value a and the ratio, right? Because that's what our formula is based off of. So what do we need to find now? What do we need to find now? We need to find a, right? We need to find the initial value. Okay, how do we find a? We're going to find a by taking any of these points, okay? And let's take this first point, all right? And we're going to plug this information into our function, right? Because we know that g of x is equal to a times b to the x power, all right? Well, now that we found b, we know that g of x is equal to a times, in this case, in this case 5 to the x power, right? So let's take one of these points. Let's take x equals 3 and g of x equals 75, all right? Well, at that point, g of x is 75, right? Equals, we still don't know a, but we know that b is 5, and we know that we're raising 5 to the third power, right? If we know that g of x equals a times 5 to the x power, and if we know that g of x equals 75 when x equals 3, we can fill out that information. Get this here, okay? 75 equals a to the fifth, 75 equals a times 5 to the third power. All right, well, 75 stays 75, and that equals a times what? 5 to the fifth power, we can calculate to be 3,125. Whoops, my bad. We're not taking 5 to the fifth power, we're taking 5 to the third power, which equals 125. Sorry about that. So a equals 75 equals a times 125. All right, we just took this a step at a time. So how do we solve for a? Well, we solve for a by getting a by itself on the right-hand side, right? So we'll divide both sides by 125. And what are we going to get? Let me make some room over here. We're going to get what's left over here. A is left here, right? So a equals what? A equals 75 divided by 125, right? Okay, can we simplify that? Can we simplify this? Well, let's see. What will they have a common factor of? I bet you they're going to have a common factor of 25, okay? Well, 75 is 25 times 3, right? And what is 125? 125 is 25 divided by 5, right? Well, we can cancel out both of these factors of 25, right? And let me make some room. And we can know that a is equal to 3 over 5, right? We can know that a is equal to 3 over 5 because 75 divided by 125, if we cancel out a factor of 25 from the numerator and the denominator, we get 3 over 5. So we've got b and we've got a now, right? A equals 3 over 5 and b equals positive 5. So finally, we can make some room to write out this function. And it is g of x equals 3 over 5 times 5 to the x power.